In recent days, you may have been hearing more, reading more about a proposal from the state of Wisconsin that would transfer all of the responsibilities of a city assessor, a village assessor, for example, in the village of Plover. All assessing would be transferred to the county. And you're hearing more and more about what a surprise it was. I don't think too many people in cities across the entire state of Wisconsin, villages, had any idea as to why that is so important and where in the world did that come from. Now, let me tell you why it's something we really need to slow down and think about, do some planning about. Don't know that it's necessarily the worst idea, but because it's one of those ideas that has basically been sprung on cities throughout the entire state, villages and townships, with an implementation date of 2017, there really isn't an awful lot of time if we're going to make that transition from city assessors, village assessors, to a county-wide level of assessment. Now, let me tell you why there are probably some initial concerns with it, and I think my friend Dan Mahoney, Village of Plover Administrator, summarized some of them very well in a recent news article. The property assessment process, city assessors, village assessors, requires a very high level of training, skill, and education. The certifications that go with this state license are vast, and it requires individuals with tremendous experience, educational background, and currently this county that I'm aware of has no experience employees at that level. There's no one at the county level that would have the level of experience, the training, the knowledge, educational background to be an assessor. The assessors here in Stevens Point over the years that I have known, and I have known a couple of them, the assessors in the village of Plover, surrounding areas, basically are doing an outstanding job. They are doing an excellent work and a very, very difficult piece of governing here in the state of Wisconsin. And again, I think what most city mayors, village administrators, town chairs are questioning is implementing a complete change this big from city assessing to county by the year 2017 simply is not realistic. Again, the county has no employees, no training, no software, and that's another issue that I know many people are talking about. The state of Wisconsin recently, within the last year or two, required all cities to basically upgrade their software packages. These were expensive assessing software packages that the city had to buy, Plover had to buy. I think my friend Dan Mahoney makes a good point. Is the state planning to reimburse cities and villages for that expensive software that was purchased and now basically would become obsolete before it has too many years of being used? And I think it's also important to realize something that I've talked about. Everybody enters data a little bit differently, towns, cities, and villages, so to try and come up with a one-size-fits-all is going to be problematic, and it could create a very expensive problem for you, the taxpayers of not only this city, but villages and towns, as there's a requirement that's going to make it impossible for any community to not be at what's called 100% of assessed value, which means it'll be a evaluation process that is underway all the time, which could become very expensive. Which is another thing, the reason the city is looking at it is right now we're into year 2 of a citywide revaluation. That's an extremely expensive proposition, but required by state law for cities to do. Once we're under a certain level of assessment in a community, we have to, by state law, reevaluate the entire city, reassess the whole city. That process is extremely expensive. The money has been budgeted for last year, this year, and next year. And then, of course, it begs the question, well, do we stop and wait until the county takes over if that's the process? So I think there's a lot of areas here where we have to recognize the professionalism of our assessors in the cities throughout the entire state of Wisconsin and in the villages. And if at anything we need to slow down a little bit, state of Wisconsin should do some analysis as to, is this really something that is necessary? It surprised a lot of people, especially at the county level. Is it something that is going to negatively impact the homeowners in the city of Stevens Point? It could. And we need to do some study, and to say we're going to implement this by 2017 simply is not realistic. So we need to keep an eye on that. And we also need to remember, as I pointed out to a reporter recently, I don't remember the exact year. It was either the late 90s or early in 2002 or 3. There was a test pilot done in Kenosha County where all of the assessing for villages and cities and townships in Kenosha County was transferred to the county government. The pilot project failed miserably, and it wasn't too many years later it was discontinued, and all of the assessing responsibilities were transferred back to the local municipalities. So there's an awful lot of work to be done in Wisconsin, and some analysis that needs to be done to make sure this is really a good plan. We need to slow down, study it, and make sure that it makes sense for the taxpayers, and that cities are really able to follow the letter of the law when it comes to the revaluation process, and that we haven't created yet another system that's very expensive for counties to implement and where cities and villages would lose money.